Here is some information that will help your average do-it-yourselfer as well as a professional home builder looking to save a few dollars. And it's going to have something to do with on-center stud spacing. And I know when a lot of people think of this, they think of 16 inches on center, 24 inches on center, or even 19.2 inches on center. But the thing I've never heard anyone ever mention is that it won't always benefit all of the trades, especially for drywall insulation and exterior plywood siding. So let's go ahead and start with a wall that is laid out 16 inches on center, meaning that all of the stud bays are going to be the same, except for the one on the end most of the time and the first one. So for example, we're going to have 14.5 inches in between these stud bays, and this one here is going to be 3/4 of an inch less if we're using 2x4s that are 1.5 inches wide, which is a common stud width. And if we lay everything out correctly, then we should end up with our drywall breaking on the center of one of the framing studs. However, it isn't always going to work out well on the other side. So I'm not about to suggest this is the perfect method to eliminate as much waste as possible with drywall. That might require a little more planning. So I would have to cut this sheet, and this sheet. And the only full-length piece of drywall I would have for this wall would be right here. Now, that's not the reason why I made the video. The reason I made the video is because I rarely hear anyone mentioning the problem they're going to have if they lay out this wall here in the same manner, where we're going to be butting this piece of drywall up against this piece of drywall and shoving everything over 5/8 of an inch if we're using 5/8 drywall. And if I do shove it over 5/8 of an inch, I'm only going to end up with 1/8 of an inch to attach the other piece of drywall to, the one that's going to attach to this side of the wall framing. So to fix this, all we need to do is cut 5/8 of an inch off of this piece of drywall. And that's not really going to produce a lot of waste. However, it is going to take a little bit of time. But we can fix it by simply moving this wall framing stud over. So if I move it over 5/8 of an inch, I'm going to end up with these measurements for the stud bays here. So you can see where this one here is a little shorter. And none of these measurements will create problems for our insulation that's usually going to be 15 inches wide. However, you can see where the one on the end is pushing it a little bit. We're ending up with a 15 and 1/8 inch measurement. And I'm not about to suggest the insulation won't fit in there. However, what if we move this stud over 3/8 of an inch to make this bay a little smaller? And you might not be able to do this if it's going to create a problem on any of the drywall installing underneath the upper drywall. So how do we fix that? By simply moving all of the studs over a little bit and creating the same stud bays, or we can create a smaller stud bay here than the rest of them if we're using 1/2 inch drywall. So by simply changing the layout on the other side where the drywall won't be butting up against the wall framing, but will be butting up against a piece of drywall, we can probably eliminate the need to cut this one piece of drywall. Now that you have all of that, what if you're going to be installing plywood siding? Well, then now you're going to have to choose between the plywood or the drywall. Which one is going to be more expensive? And that's probably not going to be that difficult because the plywood siding is usually 3 to 4 times more expensive and going to require you to pay more attention to the stud layout for the siding than it will for the drywall. And I get it, something like this isn't going to be a concern of a framing carpenter who doesn't care about the drywaller or the person who's going to be installing the siding. But I was the guy who was usually going to be doing all of it. And I often adjusted my stud layout to minimize the amount of time required to cut these pieces and leftover waste. And thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out some of our other videos on YouTube. And if you can't find the videos on YouTube, make sure that you visit our website to find a complete organized list of all of the videos we've made so far.